Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, it's Matt Bailey here, your branch director for the SMWS here in Australia, and tonight is Underdogs. I'm going to bring in my other guests, two regular features. Here we go. Two of the best-looking gentlemen I know. Here they are. Adam, Andrew, thank you so much for joining, as always.
Pleasure to be here, as always.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. This is great. Welcome to Underdogs. Whose phone is that? Whose phone is it? Andrew, I know it's you. I know it's you. Okay. Tonight is Underdogs. The whole purpose of tonight's virtual, this is the July virtual, and the whole purpose of tonight is to taste through 5 whiskies as we regularly do on these live streams. And it's a celebration of the underdog distilleries, of the codes that are often overlooked. And because it's one of those things that, we always say that we always have that message of ignore the code if you can and trust in the flavor profiles and the tasting notes. And if there's something there that you read and you go, I'd love to taste peach and apricot sorbet in a whiskey. And that might be in a tasting note. Then don't worry about the code so much because it's so far removed from the house style. But we can't help but being code hunters. And so it's one of those things of saying, yeah, I'd love to always have just a 33 or a 1 or something on hand and ready to go. But it's often we look at these codes and 80s and 113s and G15s and say, this is, we don't see that code as often. And it's a bit of an underdog, if you like. It's a bit of one of those codes that is not as popular. So there we go.
One I think that's interesting, Matt, is that the distilleries that we put in the Underdogs camp is a rapidly shrinking group because once upon a time they all would have been underdogs in the context of the society. Every cask number would have been some strange unknown thing that wasn't particularly well known about. You think back to when the society started, and of the 90 distilleries that might have been around at that time, 15 to 20 had a single malt presence. The rest were all mysteries. So they all would have been underdogs back in the day, but they're all just slowly getting a bit more fame and acknowledgement as the industry grows over time.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the SMWS especially to be that light in a way, to shine a light on what would otherwise be not seen as a single malt. And we're going to touch on that for each whiskey. I mean, because some of these, actually most of them, you don't regularly see as a single malt whiskey bottled, and that's the reality of it. So, without much needing to be said, I think we might tuck into our first whiskey. And that is, of course, cask 80.37 Afternoon Tea Tot. Now, for those playing along at home, and yes, thank you for the comments on my potato cam. I think it's more a reflection of my internet connection, to be honest, rather than my actual camera. But we're doing it in menu order tonight. So we're starting with the 80.37 spicy and sweet. You may want to pour a bit of that into your glass nice and early. There's the sample.
There's the sample if you don't want it blurry.
Yes, thank you. That's true. So pour a bit of that in the glass.
That's the same thing with the writing, not backwards.
Yeah. You've mirrored your camera. Well done. Good.
No, it's just because I'm up in Sydney. We're slightly different to you guys.
Yeah.
I thought you were at the vaults.
All right. Actually, this is the first time I can say that this Andrew could not be possibly sitting where his background is at the moment, because it's yesterday, I think, was when the renovations kicked off. So vaults is technically closed at the moment. So unless he wants to be surrounded by scaffolding, and I think your background might not fool anyone right now.
You just summed up my working day, Matt. I'm surrounded by scaffolding every day.
But is the whiskey still there is the question.
That's right.
SMWS shining a bright searchlight into the dark room of hidden gems. That is an accurate description of what tonight's all about. And in general, this society is very good at. So I can safely say that I don't think any of us here, us three, or any of you watching along, would have can safely say they've toured this distillery. There's a good chance you've driven past it. You've toured it?
Yeah, been through the joint. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. They don't have a visitor centre though, do they? They don't have like
no, they
don't.
No. I was able to secure an appointment with the manager there and went through. That was 2014 for Glen's Bay.
Oh, there you go. I remember this one from tasting earlier this year in Perth. Super surprising, such good flavour, bang for buck. Yeah. This is not a new release. Some cities have already tasted this. It would have been in a few tastings, but it would have flown under the radar on an outturn.
I think it was a midweek release, this one.
Oh, there you go. It was midweek release. Yeah, so some of the midweek releases do fly under the radar, definitely for us as well. But 9 years in a first fill bourbon hogshead, so slightly bigger than a barrel. And from a distillery that is, it's one of those distilleries that has just a lovely, I guess I've always found an oily sort of textural note to it, and I find that even with this one as well. Betty's getting a caramel note on that one. Hi, Betty. Good to see you again. 59.9%. We're starting pretty high on this one.
It is, isn't it? But it's still a lovely nose.
I definitely get that caramel note, like caramel biscuits and pancakes.
Yeah, a bit of menthol, sort of that smooth, wafery caramel.
Yeah. I might be inclined to try this with a drop of water, see how we go. So, Andrew, from your trip of this, which was nearing on 10 years ago, what can you recall as, like, give us the tour rundown. Give us the walkthrough.
Oh, look, an absolutely working class, workhorse distillery. Because it's not open for visitors, there's nothing pretty to see there. They're not bothering to polish up the stills. Occupational health and safety hazards all over the place. You'd trip over a pallet or a cask end or something everywhere. But like all the distilleries, they just quietly went about their business. Put everything together. There was a reasonably old school setup in that there was someone looking after the mash at one end, someone looking after the fermentation, and then another guy on the stills running each. And they're all doing their 8-hour shifts 24/7 at the time. I don't know if they're still on 24/7, but 2014 was that period when there was a lot of optimism and enthusiasm in the industry. They believed at the time that the markets were going to open up for the so-called BRIC markets at the time: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and they were putting down lots and lots of stock to be able to service that in 4 to 10 years time. So yeah, they were busy.
I was just thinking as you're saying that. It almost for distillers, it must be this, what would you call it? Like really, it must actually be a pleasure almost to be a distiller at one of the workhorse distilleries that doesn't have guests walking through it regularly and doesn't have visitors, doesn't require the stills to be polished. When I've walked around distilleries in the past, and they've often had, tour groups coming through 2, 4, 6 times a day or something like that, or even more. And it's almost like it's a distraction. We're trying to make whiskey here, folks. It's like there's people rolling barrels and making spirit, and it's like, and you've got to stop every half hour for a group of 20 to walk through your work site.
Yeah.
So I guess the workhorse ones would almost be kind of fantastic. Great question here from Tyler. Let's bring that up on screen. Once it wakes up and pulls it up, there we go. How do you know if you should add a drop of water or not when tasting whiskey? I find that it can vary. That's a very good question.
I know the answer to that. You don't.
Take it away.
You've just got to try. You've just got to try.
Yeah.
It's
talked
amazing how often it's counterintuitive too. It can be really counterintuitive. Sometimes the ones that have got a really high ABV that you think, oh, surely this needs a drop, they can be, I hate to use the S word, but they can be smooth. They can be very gentle on the palate. And then you can have some lower strength ones that might be 52, 53, 54 that are absolutely rough and screaming for water. You've just got to dive in and try it.
Yeah, Tyler. It's also, it just comes down to personal preference as well. A lot of it is personal preference. Sometimes you, and also my little rule of thumb, as I've said before, this is not sort of like, doesn't apply for all whiskeys at all. But I've always found that sort of younger ex-bourbon casks like this one, a 9-year-old ex-bourbon, will often appreciate a few drops of water added to it. And then I say sherry casks and wine casks generally less so. And then super old whiskey, once you head into that sort of 20, 30 something year old whiskeys, tread carefully if at all. But that's just a very sort of generalist rule of thumb that I sort of play by. But you'll find your own experience will differ, of course, and that's part of the journey.
Certainly a good rule of thumb to start with, Matt. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good one to start with, especially if you're new to it, but the other thing is the tread carefully thing is important, because especially if you're ordering it from bar or somewhere, you can't take the water back out again. So you can very easily ruin a dram by adding too much water. That's more than likely. Cool.
Welcome to Mark Teague, who's just joined us.
Good to see you, Mark. We'll bring you up on screen as Facebook user, but I recognize that whiskey glass anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. That's him. When you're known by your Tumblr emoji, then that's a good call sign. Yeah,
I do associate Mark with the Tumblr emoji. You use it quite often, and it's sort of part of your sign on and sign off. It's great. That's
saying something in the whiskey industry.
Yeah, especially a lot of text messages. It's like spicy and sweet flavor profile. I think that's very appropriate for that one. Very appropriate. But that is an underdog, and it is a distillery that does sort of, I always say sort of, has a core range. They have a flora and fauna release, but that's it. I mean, you see it independently bottled. You see it as a flora and fauna through Diageo's flora and fauna. I don't know if I'm technically flora and fauna is a core range, but it's.
I'd call it an official bottling rather than a core range.
That's fair. Yeah, official bottling. Yeah, that's true. That's a better way to put it. And cool. Well, shall we move on? Move on to the next whiskey.
Yeah, only just last thing to say about the distillery, of course. When you go past the distillery gate, there's a big sign for J&B Rare, and this was always one of the key components in J&B Rare. So if you've always enjoyed that blend, there's a good chance there's a fair chunk of this particular spirit inside it.
Is J&B still on market? Is that still a thing?
It's a big seller in the States. To be honest with you, I've not seen it in Australia too much recently. So yeah, maybe it's tapering away. At the end of the day, it's owned by our good friends at Diageo. Certainly in Australia, they're pushing the Johnny Walker portfolio more than some of their other ones. So maybe we're backing off in their market a little bit.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of like blends of yesteryear where the brand has stayed on for a long time, but sometimes you forget how long it's been off market. And I think that's for things like, you say, you could pick up, back, years ago you'd see on the bottom shelf, you'd always see things like Black Douglas or J&B or, Bailey Nickel Jarvie or something. And you'd say, oh yeah, I'm sure you can still get them. And most of them, you're like, oh, they're not there anymore. Or, I don't know.
Cuddy Sark is the other one. Examples like that, and even famous grouse honey disappeared for a bit before it came back in Australia. So it's just that all the marketing people deciding which markets and which countries they want to run their campaigns in and share the love around the world.
Yeah, indeed. Dave Cook, that black and white's a good example. Hague's is another example, and there's all these, blends over the years that were once properly distributed in Australia, but maybe less so now. Whereas, you see some now that are coming bigger onto market that didn't exist before. Like, there's a lot more dewars now than there was 5-10 years ago. And, it keeps changing, keeps coming up.
But that's another great example of Bacardi flexing their muscles at the moment. They're really pushing hard their single malts that are in their portfolio, and they're bringing the blend dewars along for the ride as well. It's they're really trying to get a bigger wedge in the market.
Yeah,
and I agree with you, Dave. B&J was sensational.
Sensational blend.
We had that as the welcome dram at so many tastings in Sydney over so many years, and we were all devastated when it disappeared.
Yeah, that was
And
great.
that is one that's genuinely disappeared. They don't make that anymore.
No. And here's a small tie-in. The bottling plant that used to bottle B&J is now sitting at the SMWS Warehouse Bottling Society bottlings. The equipment lives on.
That sounds like a Star Wars reference. Like, the circle is complete.
Now we are the masters.
Yes.
Cuddy Sark is still around. Okay, there you go. Yep. It still bounces around. Now Whiskey's my jam. He's got his emoji and he's on a different channel. Okay. Good. Okay, so we move on to the next whiskey. It's a peach. Okay. We're jumping up in ABV here. We're moving over to Juicy Oak and Vanilla. And we're moving on to my favorite codes, actually, of more recent times. We've had some cracking 113s that have just been like peach syrup in a glass.
It's an unusually appealing color for something that's reasonably pale. Oh, wow. By the way, just quietly, check the ABV on this. 65.4. My goodness. At 11 years old. So that was filled at a high strength.
Yeah. 70
Is that
something.
typical of this distillery to fill high?
Well, this distillery is owned by Shivers Brothers, which are part of the Pernod Ricard group. And they're blenders. And so, you would have believed that, like everyone else, they were filling most of their casks at 63.5 so they could swap and trade them on the blenders markets with all the other companies. Who knows this one's background? And I've not read previously that they're consistently filling it at higher strengths for everything now. So I don't know whether this was part of a particular campaign or a parcel that was always destined to be sold on to someone else. Who knows?
Cinnamon icing is a great tasting note, Betty. That's fantastic. I know where you're coming with that. That really sort of like fizzy white sugar top layer sort of stuff going on here.
I'm getting that pink icing that you get on tea buns.
Yeah. Doesn't nose like a mid-60 ABV. It doesn't at all, does it?
Doesn't taste like one either.
That's really true, Adam. Does it?
I actually think the 80 had a bigger bite than this one.
It's not aggressive, but I can tell from that the body and the muscle and strength of that spirit. This probably could take a splash or two and not suffer for it. Having said that, I've sat down at the table without any water within reach, so I'll just press on need if it's okay, lads.
Always be prepared.
Yeah, well, you did see me run in the door 3 seconds before we went to air. So.
No, that's true.
There's a lovely dark chocolate note on this as well.
So another workhorse. Sorry.
Oh, you're exactly right, a workhorse distillery, but this is one of the two distilleries that lays claim to being the highest distillery in Scotland. And the other one is Dalwhinnie, and the two of them claim it, but it's been measured, and one of them is, I can never remember the stat, is it 5 feet or something? One's 5 feet higher than the other officially.
Okay,
is it one of those
so
things where
length?
Yeah, I mean, is it one of those things where one of them just puts an aerial on the roof or something and goes, we need to... It's like one of those sort of marketing tricks that always like, no, I'm taller now because it's
So is it how tall it goes, not just like where the base starts? It's not just a very tall hill.
I remember reading somewhere that after a lot of conjecture, they agreed to pay a surveyor to come along and actually, find the base market. I don't know whether it was at the front entrance door or quite what it was, but in any event, this distillery won by some ridiculously small margin. It was somewhere between 5 and 9 feet or something like that.
So,
and by the way, in winter, this place is freezing. Like the snow here is extraordinary because obviously it's such a high altitude. It's a pretty bitter place to be.
the question would be, Andrew, what does high elevation mean? I mean, if we say it's a high elevation distillery, like how would you say that might affect the distillation or even maturation?
I'm sure there are scientists with a lot more knowledge and skill than me in this regard that might talk about how the microclimate might impact distillation at an atmospheric level. I truly don't know the answer. What we do know is that courtesy of the location, and this place was founded in the 70s in an area that had a good water supply. A lot of the water supply for a good chunk of the year would have been snow melt. Obviously, there are a lot of distilleries around that don't get snow melt as part of their water supply. So it's like any place. It's a function of where it is and its local environment, local microclimate, and all the rest of it. But I don't think any of us have ever nosed a whiskey and gone, oh yes, that smells just like a high altitude distillery to me. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I've no doubt it has some impact, Matt, but how you define or qualify that or quantify it, I wouldn't know.
With the exception of like the worm tubs, it's almost safe to say that there are some similarities between this and Dalwhinnie. They do often have that sort of very light, soft sort of white sugar icing sort of note to them, and it's like I've never had like a 113 a Bravel and gone, oh, that really reminds me of a low altitude distillery, or something else. It has got a certain characteristic which I think might be contributed to from that maybe.
It's lovely. The oak's just starting to come through now with a bit of time. I'm getting pencil shavings, sort of what do you call it, carpenter's workshop aromas. And just tiny hints of juicy fruit as well, juicy fruit chewing gum.
There's just one note right at the beginning, which I really agree with, about we found ourselves in a German bakery. I just get like sugary baked goods and like the Pfeffernuss and things like that, which are just comment here from Scabbous Driver, lime fruit tingles making our North Queensland tongues tingle.
Scabbous Driver is a bit of a poet this evening.
That's a good one. I like that one. Oh dear. Yeah, that's lovely. I did try it with a drop of water, but I don't think it actually needs it. It works both ways.
Okay.
But I don't think it needs it, so you're not missing out on much by not having water there, Andrew.
Right. Okay.
That's lovely. There it is. We just showed it before.
So again, look, owned by Shivers Brothers, part of the Pernod Ricard group. They own 13 distilleries, or did it go back down to 12 because they sold one of them off recently, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it's 12. I think it's 12.
Was it Glen Tucker's they just got rid of recently? I'm speculating now. In any event, so that means that a good chunk of this is destined for the Shivers blends. So Shivers Regal, obviously, part of the Pernod Ricard group. They also own the Ballantine's blend. So between Shivers Regal and Ballantine's, those two would be where a lot of this stuff would end up in, and hence why we don't, as being an underdog distillery for tonight, it doesn't have its own brand or official bottlings.
I thought it was you guys. I thought it was Daz and Carla. Because you said North Queensland, I was like, there can't be too many members on tonight from North Queensland. So just there we go. And a great comment from Mark. SMWS seem to consistently release Distillery 113 bottlings. Well, consistently, I mean, that's 61 bottlings in 40 years is a few, not heaps, but rare from other indie bottlers. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a fair call. You don't see it too much even as an indie bottling. That's true. So yeah, I guess it's just a good opportunity of casks that we came across. Some of these would have been matured entirely from the society. Some would have been bought semi-mature or mature, but yeah, they I think it's great that we get that access of casks. And it wasn't an early code either for us. This is not like, this is not like code 37 or something. It's like code 113. So it's fairly late in the relationship. So it would have been probably around maybe even around 2010 or just before that code joined the society. So yeah.
The other interesting thing, and I'm about to break a cardinal rule here and commit a mortal sin, but we try not to mention the names of the distilleries. Matt, you referenced it earlier by saying Brayville. It also goes by the name of Braes of Glenlivet because it is actually in the valley of the Livet. So yeah, sometimes just getting back to Mark's comment there about independent bottlings of it, sometimes you do see it bottled as the Braes of Glenlivet. And then obviously at about that time that they were trying to isolate Glenlivet and give it its own, distilleries were encouraged to no longer piggyback to the Glenlivet name. That was when they came up with the name Brayville instead.
Yeah, I guess I have seen a couple of Braes of Glenlivet bottlings, but yeah, you're right. I don't think the word Brayville you see too many times in indie bottlings. Very nice. Well,
that's really changing. I know we need to move on, Matt, but that is seriously changing in the glass. And I think it's just because it was such a high alcohol. I think there's just more volatiles giving off over time and changing. So this is one I genuinely think you could pour your dram and just let this sit for 10, 15 minutes, come back later on at the end of the night and find a completely different whiskey in your glass.
Yeah, lots of fruit in that as well. It's just opening up very nicely. Shall we move on? We're just moving on to, and sorry, yes, Corbin Mondi, this is awesome. Yeah, it is an awesome bottling. And that was the whole point of tonight, is to shine a light on the underdogs. I guarantee you there's not many chances you may have looked at, say, something like a 113.61 on the website or on an outturn and gone, oh, I can't wait for that to come out. I mean, it's just there. They just sort of come around, and a chance to taste these and really have them in your glass and say, 80 and 113 and now heading on to 46. They're distilleries you don't see as single malts, and they're distilleries you don't see very often bottled otherwise. And so it's like, most of the output from these distilleries goes into blends, and some gets hooked off to brokers and whatnot. But this one is, this is a bit different tonight. Great question. As we head into 46.125 Undying Wood, question from Carla and Daz here. So about AD and AD, AI, I think. But what is it that allows SMWS to get hold of stuff that you very rarely see, if ever, from some of the other IBs? In a nutshell, it's relationship based. The whole whiskey industry runs on relationships. It might be a case of where our spirits director has a great relationship with, say, that previous whiskey with Pernod Ricard or Chivas Brothers Group, and say there's some great casks that come through, or we might get an opportunity to buy some new make and put it into our own wood and mature in our warehousing. And as we said before at the society, a lot of it comes down to the fact that we don't put the distillery name on the bottle, that we're not competing with any of their brands, and so they trust us to, on a better level of spirit and better level of supply, then that's not a problem. So I guess it's when they know some bottlers are going to put the name on the bottle, it's like, well, you're going to compete with our brand or compete with our distillery or compete with our single malt or whatever, and it's like there's no need for that.
Do you know, Matt, roughly what year Distillery 113 would have joined the stable?
I misspoke before. I said it could have been as late as 2010. It's actually much earlier than that, because Distillery 116 was 2002. So therefore, this would have been just before that, probably 01 or 2000 or somewhere around there would have been when 113 joined as a code. But not, yeah, so about halfway through the society story so far on that one, about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a great timeline we published in an outturn about a couple of years ago now. It was the timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, of all the the different years that each code joined.
Matt, I can tell you that 113.1 was bottled as a 17-year-old, and it was distilled in 1979. So that would make it 1996.
There you go. So just before 2000. There you go. So 96. They're very cool. So yeah. So now this next one, 113. Let's move on. No, 46. Sorry, 46.125. There we go. Undying Wood. The reason. What's going on here?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't know Morty was in the stream.
As you were.
Undying Wood. Okay, so this one
wood maturation lives on.
We did it. There was a tasting held at Addicted to Audio, which was a music and whiskey pairing back in April. That was this was one of the whiskies featured, and it hasn't had a proper release yet, and it's being properly released in August Outturn coming up. So this had a bit of a preview for members and was one of the highlights of the night. Absolutely, because it was sort of like we didn't know what to expect from it. A second fill bourbon barrel, 12-year-old. You expect it to be very, very light, but we found it, as it even says in that first line in the tasting note, unusually rich and sweet for a refill, and it just carried itself so much heavier and so much bigger than we expected. And it had the 46 characteristic of being quite earthy, petrichor, those kind of notes that we often get out of 46s. But it's another distillery. It's another Diageo workhorse distillery. It sits on the same side as Distillery 46 and 46 and 64. Sorry, 64 sits on the same site as 64, and is I think a bit of an underdog, bit of a favourite.
Daz and Mark, I'm seeing your comments on the side there. We'll leave those off to the side, but yeah, all right.
Yeah, we won't publish those on the screen, but yeah, okay.
No.
Do you say Distillery 46 and 64 are on the same site? Like
site? Yeah, they're across the road.
Physical.
They're physically in the same.
One's behind the other. They're separated by about 3 meters. You get to the end of 46, and 3 meters beyond that is 64, right behind it.
That's ironic. They're literally just the reverse of each other.
Yes, it's been remarked on before, I think.
That makes sense.
Distillery 64 is the only society one I can think of where the number rhymes with the distillery name. Yes.
Oh wow. Gee, I hope that comes up at pub trivia this Friday. That'll be
Post your answers in the comment section. No Googling.
No Googling.
They're all going to Google.
Phones in the baskets at the end of the table, please, folks. Yeah. But this is far less. This is far more savory for me than the previous Juicy Oak Vanilla. I get the slightest bit of like tobacco pouch, and like the linseed oil thing, and like earthiness, like rich old soil sort of stuff. It's like old winery note as well.
I tell you what, you just said linseed oil. My goodness, are you spot on with that? That just took me back to my cricketing days at school and oiling my old cricket bat with the linseed oil. That's mate, you've evoked a childhood memory there. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, I get linseed oil. It's great. It's that.
No, but you're right. It's spot on.
It's like linseed oil spread on soil, like it's on sort of like old wine growth soil or something. It's freshly cut grass. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, that one.
Petrichor or cut grass, post rain smell. That's not uncommon for 46 either. So that's Distillery 54 is a close rhyme, sort of. Yeah.
If you've got a very bad Scottish accent.
Yeah.
A balur. Yeah, it was always renowned as when you went back to those really old guidelines from 30 years ago about when they tried to pigeonhole so many of the distilleries and give them a house style. This one was always fell into the grassy camp. It was always, how Speyside can be grassy, or you can have the sweet sherry type, or the orchard fruits like the pears of Glenfiddich, for example. This one always fell in the grassy camp, and that's shining through with this one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely. It's quite grassy, but it's very easy drinker as well. I mean, it's that lovely sweet spot, 55.2%, 12-year-old, mid-50s.
Hey, Matt, do I have any opportunity here to share a screen with you?
Yeah, go for it. I think you can.
I wonder if it's going to let me.
I'll enlarge your screen that you bring up here.
Yeah, if I click the right one. I've not tried this before. Let's give this a go. That's the one. Yeah, can you bring that up?
Yeah, I'll bring that up. Here we go.
So you can see here, here's the Distillery 46 at the front, and 64 is immediately behind it at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
There you go.
That's all.
Shout out to J-Rock Lawn and Gardening as well.
I will turn that off. Yeah.
Shout out to J-Rock Lawn and Gardening. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a cool gig. It's probably like, yeah, we've got these huge fields for you to mow. Get on with it.
Yeah.
It's like, you're our only
Second
client.
life.
Yeah, it's lovely.
That's a lovely drop. That is a pour yourself a decent dram and enjoy it over the course of a movie whiskey, I reckon.
Yeah, very much agree. And I'm a huge sucker for the 46s. I just like, this one's just got this. For me, it was just slightly heavier and earthier and linseedy. That I thought it was just an interesting whiskey. This one it's an underdog, but it's also a preview. So it's in August outturn coming up. But however, we're going to just do a quick section now in between drams whilst we're enjoying that 46. You can pre-pour your next whiskey if you like, which is the 97, the Labyrinth for the Wayward Wander, which is a very special Vaults Collection bottling. But I'm going to do just a quick little micro plug here. So right now, until the end of July, yeah, it's happening. That's right. Right now to the end of July, you have free shipping on the website. Just use the code Winter Warmers. Winter Warmers, am I getting that right? It's Winter Warmers, isn't it? Yeah.
Winter Warmers, one word.
Yeah, Winter Warmers, one word. Just use that on the website. Of course, if you need a way to access the website, look at that. It's just on your screen right now. Just hover your phone over it. There you go. Look at that. But even better than that, of course, I'm.
It's gone. Wait. It's gone, Matt.
Oh, wait, there it is. There it is. There it is. Andrew's scanning right now. He's using free shipping. There it is.
Oh, score.
And I get a little notification saying that someone just scanned it. So that's good. And then, of course, not just free shipping. Use Winter Warmers for free shipping, but also maximizing for this one. 2 bottles or more. 2 bottles or more. Da, 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 da. Get a free beanie. You get a society beanie. It's a $30 beanie. And of course, Vaults Collection Bottlings get a $149 jacket. Damn. How good is that? Deals.
Second time. That's the second time I've seen that
today. I've done that. One was pre-recorded and one's live. The live one's just as good.
Keep your eyes on socials.
Keep your eyes on socials. Keep your eyes on your inbox. Winter Warmers, free shipping on all the bottlings, of course. And any 2 bottles or more get a free beanie because it's cold. We're in July. Get a beanie.
Keep your head warm and keep your whole body warm with a jacket. Buy a Vaults Collection. Yeah. And all the deals are stackable.
They're all stackable. Like get 2 bottles and free shipping.
This is like listening to the old Demtel ads from the 80s and 90s. I'm just waiting for one of you to say, but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. Dial 1-800 SMWS. Come on.
SMWS jacket, usually $2,500-$3,000. We're going to do that for nothing when you buy a Vaults Collection bottling.
Call me now. I'm waiting.
Call me now.
My damn
What's happened to this stream? Where have we gone? Okay, now that we're appropriately off the rails, it's a great opportunity to stack. It is stackable, as Adam said. So you get the 2 bottles in, and you get free shipping and the beanie, or the Vaults Collection with the jacket. Oh, it's so good. Those jackets are so good. They are
incredible.
UK winter grade jackets.
They are, aren't they?
Like Andrew and I, we've said this before, we run hot. That jacket, you wear it for 20 minutes, you're a sweat machine. So, it's a good jacket. It's very much suited for...
It's also, it's very Scottish in that you can go outside in the teeming rain and not a drop will come in. It's a seriously good Scottish jacket.
It's also got a hidden hood as well. So when it does rain, you can just protect your hair. Or head. Sorry, Andrew.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, appreciate that.
If you need that extra layer, wear your beanie.
Mark Teague, you're off my Christmas list after that last comment.
Dear.
Dave Cook's got the right idea. 1-800 SMWS AU.
Don't dial SMWS 1 AU because I don't know where that goes. It probably leads you to somewhere in some Telstra trap somewhere. You know what I mean? You get stuck on some call line forever that has nothing to do with us. Where my undying would be? Oh, okay. Look, it's time to move on with that comment. Right, where were we?
97.
I've poured 97, and it is nosing beautifully.
Yeah, 97.24. I love the idea of throwing not just a closed distillery, but another Underdog and a Vaults collection bottling in here, because it's just otherwise you don't get chances.
Not just a closed distillery, Matt, but an absolutely dead, demolished, silent, never to return distillery.
Yeah,
absolutely gone.
This is like cooking fresh choc fudge brownies for me. I mean, this has been sitting in my glass for a while, like probably a good half an hour, but it is remarkable nose.
That's a good call, Adam. I agree. Yeah, chocolate brownies for sure.
Now I just really want chocolate brownies.
This distillery is one of those great what's the word? Tragedies and enigmas. You know, we talk about the lost lowland distilleries. There was this one, St. Magdalene was another, Rosebank, even though that's been resurrected. They were all just amazing. They closed for more reasons to do with where they were located than their quality or anything else. And, 10, 12, 15 years later, we all realized what a tragedy it was and how some of those whiskies were just shining at 20, 25 years old. And, this distillery, every example I've had in the last 10 to 15 years have just been stunners. It's amazing how, for a lowland whiskey that supposedly had a lighter spirit, it's amazing how many of them could actually really kick on and deliver down the track. I can't remember, Matt. This was one of the classic lowland distilleries that triple distilled, wasn't it?
Until about 1929, 1930. Yeah.
Oh, okay. In that case,
yeah,
never mind.
Yep.
I was going to say that sometimes the triple distilled ones can actually go the journey in the wood for a bit longer, but
no, this spirit is definitely not triple distilled.
Okay.
This is double distilled. You're talking before about those claims like Dalwhinnie versus Breville of the tallest elevation. One of my favorite claims of this distillery, I can say, we'll say Little Mill, is that it's. I said it. Okay, but one of the claims is their claim is that it's Scotland's oldest distillery, and it was like 1724 or something for these guys, or 1774. And they always claim that they were the earliest, and they're long gone now. Obviously, as we're saying, they're demolished. But I always find that that's one of those claims that, like, earliest versus earliest legal distillery is always, that's the first differentiator, and then all those kind of things. They claim they're the earliest, but a number of historians say that they're not.
It's like that thing we have in Sydney here with all the old historical pubs around the rocks, and there's three pubs
Sydney's
that all
oldest
lay
pub.
claim to being Sydney's oldest pub. And then when you drill down to it, there's the one that's the oldest building, the one that's got the oldest license, and the one that's been operating continuously the longest. So they all three of them, depending on how they define it, are correct. But you just change the narrative to suit what you got going for you.
Marketing.
Yes.
Marketing. Carla and Daz say the Queenslanders need SMWS Havana special release thongs. Yeah, that could be cool, actually. That could be part of our summer collection. Great comment
summer
from
collection.
we do have some comments coming in on
23-24 summer.
Yeah, well, we do have some comments coming in from LinkedIn as well, where we broadcast. Phil Mack is in the Phil Mack. Good to see you, Phil. The rain is very
Phil,
gentle.
I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah, where have you been, Phil? Where have you been? Haven't seen you in bloody ages, mate. But it's good to see you tuning in every so often. It's very gentle, but it's persistent, and that's the jacket will hold it off. It's fine. Anyway, and then it's distillery 97 now. Agreed upon the oldest established Scottish distillery.
Not
sure,
that it's dead.
Yeah. Dead. And the oldest operating distillery these days laid to claim is Glen Turret throw that one around a bit, which again is like
as do Bumore.
As do Bumore, exactly. So Glen Turret versus Bumore sort of thing. It's like because they're both in the 1700s. I can't remember one of them. I think it's Bumore. They print the year on the glass. They etch it into the glass. They're so proud of that number. Caramel on this one, Betty. Yep.
Isn't it Bushmills have got that really bad like the 16 something or other on it? they've got a reference to a 17th century date on their label, and everyone knows it's crap, but they continue to say it. But anyway, getting back to the whiskey.
One of my favorite claims. It's extraordinary. Sorry, yeah, it is extraordinary. One of my favorite whiskey marketing ones was a core range feta can bottling from like about 8-9 years ago, and it was like feta can Dior, Fior, or something, and it was a no age statement, 40% feta can in a purple box, and it said on the front of the box, "The world's greatest single malt." I thought you really have to have sort of nads of steel to put that on your box of no age statement whiskey at the time. It's like, so.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Hold on a second. There's a comment here I just saw which got me very triggered, which I want to bring up here.
Shook.
No, it wasn't that one. Look, I'll find it again. That's okay. Oh, Corbin did say, actually, this is a good point. This 30-year-old Vaults Collection release is holding up at 57.5%. After 30 years of maturation, that is pretty extraordinary. Andrew, you and I have definitely seen some like Vaults Collection 30, 35 older whiskies that sit at like, 43.6% natural cask strength or 49.2 or something. They're always in that sort of mid to low 40s or so. You don't see too many above like 55 after 30 years. You see now and then, but it's uncommon, I'd say.
Yeah. And what does that tell you? It was a very inert cask, a very tight cask. And the whiskey's all the better for it, I have to say. This is just extraordinary. I mean, let's get back to the subject here. What an unbelievably good whiskey. The finish on this is just out of this world. And it's a completely different flavor profile to anything else we've tried tonight so far. Despite still being, it's an second fill bourbon barrel, which is, what the previous one was. It's just next level, isn't it? It's so complex and multifaceted.
Corbin's just made another good call. Alan's bananas on the nose.
Yeah. I'll go with that.
Yeah, Dave, Distillery 51 beats everyone 1608. Yeah, we're not talking about Ireland, mate. This was the oldest in Scotland claim, but yes. And it was Dov's comment that got me shook, that I won't let it get me shook. None of them match the oldest one from Tasmania. Look, that claim is also absurd, and that's also incorrect. So, but I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole other kettle of fish. Alan's bananas on those, yes, absolutely, I agree. Andrew says Betty. It's a labyrinth of a whiskey, isn't it? It's in the name. There's just layers and layers of complexity and twists and turns throughout this, and it keeps changing every time I nose it.
And we're just wayward wanderers wandering through.
Oh. Just that. Say what? Are you okay? Are you okay? Did that set you off? So just like, right, that's like the straw that broke the camel's back on that one. Like, oh. Right. Andrew disconnected.
Just tasted it again.
I just love. There's a wonderful interplay here between the sweetness of toffee and caramel, and then on the finish, for me, the finish is the real highlight here because it just takes a left-hand turn to Albuquerque and brings on this fruit, this tropical note, this guava. Just extraordinary how the finish is quite unlike anything else that we've had tonight. In fact, unlike most whiskeys, most finishes round out the story that the nose and the palate gave you. This one just takes a completely different turn and goes off in another direction. But it's a pleasant direction, more to the point. You know how sometimes the finish can just fall apart or die on you or turn bitter and leave a really foul imprint or footprint on your mouth. This one just delivers.
That's fantastic.
And I've been tasting whiskey with you, Matt, for long enough to know that when you keep your mouth closed and do this with your hands, you're really enjoying it.
That finish, you know what? You know my expressions by now. That finish is fantastic. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Andrew, I must say, after working with him at least 2 out of 3 days during the week, he does that for a lot of other things as well. Admittedly, they're all flavor related. So
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Karage chicken.
The gaucho is with us.
Ah, dear, oh dear, dear, oh dear.
You know what? I poured myself only a half dram of that, and I'm now regretting it. I'm going back for seconds to finish off the dram. That is just stunning.
You've been compared to Robbie Burns with your poetic means here from Corbin.
That's a big call. That's a lot to live up to,
or down to. And it's SMWS Australia calendars featuring the Cellar Master State members, partner bars. A calendar. We've actually got a photographer going over to Andrew's just after this for the glamour shots for Andrew's glamour shots for this. So yes, they'll be featured in the calendar. He's getting at least maybe 8 or 10 of the months. We're not sure yet.
I'm standing next to an upwards ascending line arm, just for
just gently touching it, like
yes.
Look at the line arm. the angle.
Measuring tape.
Reposting previous comments. Sorry, Corbin, I may have missed this one. How many more casks of 97 could be left in SMWS warehouse? And do dead distilleries get a last bottling event? Yes and no. Well, I don't know how many 97 casks are left. I'm gonna err on the side of not many to bugger all to maybe 0. It's we're talking 30-year-old stock plus now at this point, and that there might not be many left, if any. I mean, I don't know of any. I'd say very little, if any. And dead distilleries get a last bottling event. Unfortunately, yes. And I say unfortunately because normally you end up seeing this 50-year-old release that comes in this ginormous decanter with a box around it, and it's encased in a coffin with satin and fireworks. And it's, I see it in some travel retail for $100,000. And it's like probably the last you'll ever see of it. So it's sort of like this horrible sort of endings that some of them get on their bottling moments. But yeah.
But did we, do you recall, Matt? I think the society made a point of declaring when it bottled its last Rosebank. Remember when we had that Rosebank many years ago? And I think we actually said in our turn, this will be the last one, which is a stupid thing to say because, they'll always find another cask somewhere. But and now that the distillery's been brought back to life, but they did make a point of saying it.
Yeah.
It was a celebrated moment, wasn't it?
I'll send this clip of the video to Gordon and ask him, are we keeping code 25? It's like, how does that work? But I mean, we don't really, Andrew's right. We did give that Rosebank sort of a last send off of sort of the last 25 we'll ever see. We haven't said that for this 97, but I mean, honestly, if we do see any more 97s through, it might be, I mean, this one came out, this is pushing a couple of years ago now. So I'm going to say, I'm going to err on the side of not, because we may have already seen them if so, but who knows? I don't know. I'm sorry. Hi, Matt and all. Thank you so much.
The big one will be, do you remember, Diageo had its special releases every year, and there was a Port Ellen and a Port Ellen, and then there was the special Johnny Walker Blue range, the Ghost and Rare, which had Port Ellen in it, and all of a sudden it stopped, and there were no more official Port Ellens from Diageo, and the whole community went up and said, "Oh, has the last cask been bottled?" And somewhere there'll be one with armed guards standing beside it, but sooner or later things like that are going to disappear. The last one will be gone before it drops below 40% and gets tipped down the drain. Yeah,
I mean, instead of getting tipped out, they should probably just smash some sugar and orange with it and turn it into a Port Ellen liqueur. And you know what I mean? Like they just, I don't know. It's one of those things where you go, that'd be very cool. It'd be like a
full cask old fashioned.
Yeah, a pre-batched old fashioned made out of Port Ellen. But this is it's a good point though, Andrew. I mean, it's maybe that sort of like that send off of putting the last stocks, some older casks that didn't quite fit the bill that made their way into a blend instead as they did, and then that was it. Sort of, it's like who knows, but
I think the other thing too is I mean, it's a good point to discuss. I'm sorry, we're a bit off topic now, but
that's good.
You hear about the casks that got forgotten about and discovered at the back of a warehouse, and they're super old and they're geriatric, and they end up getting bottled. But that's not to say they should be bottled. Some of those things are so over the hill and they're past it. Their best years were decades earlier. and they get bottled because, as you alluded to earlier, Matt, they can be sold with a horrendous price tag on them. And when you sell something at that price, there's a good chance no one's actually ever going to open it and taste it.
And if they do, confirmation bias will take over anyway at that price.
100%, yeah. So it's a bit of a lost cause and a circular argument, but
dear oh dear, that is a pretty special drop. That is a very special drop.
I think that dram alone was worth the price of admission.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, that's the kind of dram that would be $80, $90, $100 a glass in a bar. So that's I think around the same price as this pack for all 5 whiskeys. And our marvelous entertainment, I should add. Excuse me. Actually, there was a great comment here. I just want to throw it up because this one directed directly to Andrew. Here we go. Great idea on the calendar, as you may have seen, Andrew. AD can get his fireman gear on and strike a pose with a tasting glass. Yeah, well, we're taking ideas. We're taking suggestions. Exactly, yeah.
so is it a general knowledge that you have fireman gear?
No, it's not general knowledge. It's not general knowledge, but tonight it's specific knowledge. You all know it now. Yeah.
Dear oh dear.
Often renowned for playing with my hose.
Yeah, hype's a lot of things, Corbin. I don't know if it's anyway. It's one of those things where it's definitely going to pick up a lot of those kind of releases. It's you don't have to walk through sort of duty free to see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And AD definitely, yep. And yeah, already dropped. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, already dropped below 40. May have been why it was ended up being blended into the Ghost releases, very possibly.
Oh, good. I never thought of that, but you're probably right. Matt, you've heard me tell the story before. I can't remember if I've shared it on a live stream previously, but the society, when we were previously owned by Glenmorangie had a large parcel of Glenfarclas casks that subsequently got forgotten about, and they discovered a parcel of five Glenfarclas casks, and one of them had dropped below 40%. And this was at the old days of the old Broxburn facility. And I was there on the day that they found this out. And because of the infrastructure and what was in place at the time, the solution to this cask that was at 39.5% was to tip it down the drain. And it was a 46-year-old Glenfarclas. Apparently, I didn't get the chance to taste it, but those that did said, yeah, it was very serviceable and a lovely drop. But just the fact that it was below 40 meant they had to tip it down the drain, because at that time they had no infrastructure to deal with it in any other way. They couldn't drop it into a blend. They weren't blending at that time. And no one was interested in trying to sell it to someone else. So down she went. Absolute tragedy. And I watched it. Like, I physically watched the spirit go down the drain. I think I died that day.
Was that the last time you cried?
Was that the last time you cried, Andrew? Are you okay?
Yes, tears were shed.
I think my response to you last time hearing that story from you was similar to this one, which is what I would have gone full Super Mario Brothers and tried to work out the plumbing system of where that pipe of spirit was heading, and be like, yeah, I'm putting my mouth under that pipe. That's it. Cool. Right. Great comments coming through, everyone. Thank you so much. We're going to head on to whiskey number 5, whilst we're still talking some sense here. G15.14 for Pete's sake. Now, folks, just so you know, I poured the rest of that 97 into a glass because I only had a small sip, and I'm going to savor that after we're off live as well, because I want to take a bit more time with that one. And I encourage you to do the same for any of these whiskeys. Of course, they're all 30 ml samples. Good to share, good to have on your own, however you want to enjoy them. And I'm going to pour for Pete's sake. And like I say, Underdogs. Now, when we talk peated whiskey for a second here, the most obvious peated whiskey that is always mentioned and talked about when it comes to peated whiskey is the category that's dominated peated whiskey for such a long time. That's Islay whiskey. That's your Kalilas, your Ardbegs, your Bamors, your Bruichladdich, etc. And that is, it's renowned as Islay whiskey. But there's also lots of it's peated whiskey made all over the world. But in the mainland of Scotland, it's also made. You get your Ardmores and your Glenturrets and things like that make great peated whiskey. But you also have this distillery. I can say the distillery name because that's not this release. It's Loch Lomond Distillery. We've talked about this distillery lots of times. They've got 5 different codes with the society, 2 grain and 3 malt codes. And this falls under their grain codes, but it's a peated grain because it's, in this case, it's 100% malted barley through a column still. So we have peated barley through a column still. And we have, therefore, it's technically a grain. And it's a G15 now in our coding system.
Matt,
So it's not
just
actually
remind me, is this through the column still, or is it through the stainless steel still?
The stainless Rosdu, yeah. Sorry, the column. Yeah, look, anyhow, yeah.
So it's the pair of stills that are on the malt side of the distillery, not the grain side of the distillery.
This side, the malt side, yes. On the left, the left in of the malt, which that was a photo. I look at it. Yeah, there you go.
That's right. Is that not the toughest pair of stills to photograph? I think I tried as well. That's the best you can get. It looks like something off the set of Star Wars. So.
Yeah, that is probably as close and best photograph you can possibly get of it. It's a really awkward spot where the stills are, and you can't actually see the bottom of it, and you can't really see the top of it, and that you can't get to that platform without pissing off someone, I'm sure. So it was one of those sort of ones. Yep, it's a bit of a Star Wars still. Yeah.
So does that mean that for it to be a single grain whiskey, it doesn't actually have to be a grain other than malted barley? It's the way it's distilled that plays into it. Would that be fair in saying, or does it vary, or what's the go there?
Andrew, if you want that one, it's
sorry, Adam. I was reading the comments off to the side, so I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it?
So Matt mentioned that this is 100% malted barley, but because it goes through the column still, it's categorized into a grain whiskey. Does that mean that the way it's distilled is the defining factor of whether or not it's a grain whiskey? It doesn't necessarily have to be 100% a grain that's not malted barley.
The more relevant aspect in this scenario is the Scotch Whisky Association clamped down on the distillery and said that if you're not distilling it in a copper pot still, then it ain't malt whiskey. Right. So it was less to do with the grain than the simple shape of the still, and the fact that it wasn't a pot still and it wasn't copper, because it was a column still and stainless steel. They said, therefore, that doesn't fit our definition of malt whiskey. And if it's not malt whiskey, by definition, it's grain whiskey.
Okay. So compared to copper, what does the steel sort of do differently, would you say?
Well, copper naturally removes sulfur from the spirit, basically. So it comes out as copper sulfate. So when you have stainless steel stills, straight away you're going to get a different chemical reaction, and therefore a different base spirit at the end. And we see this in Australia. Hellier's Road is renowned for having stainless steel stills, and the only bit that comes into copper is they've got a little swan neck, or dare I say a lion arm at the top of their stills. And Hellier's Road has a very unique, distinctive flavour profile compared to all the other Tasmanian distilleries, and most people put it down to the fact that it's that stainless steel still. So it definitely has an impact on flavour.
Okay. Thank you.
It's compared to let's just talk about flavour on this whiskey for a second, as we just were. It's definitely much cleaner in peated profile than your boggy, damp sort of like if you were to compare this to say an Islay whiskey, especially like if you were to put this side by side with an Ardbeg or something, you'd get this. It's much like clean white smoke. It's not that, but it's lovely.
Well, I suppose straight away you'd say that the peat is mainland peat, and so it doesn't have that the maritime saltiness that the Islay peats will have. It's matured on the mainland as opposed to being matured on Islay, so it's away from the coast. So you don't get that maritime saline note to it. And as you say, Matt, those two things add up together to give you a very clean peated spirit. Mm. And can I say, a bloody tasty one.
That's super good. Corbin made a great comment here of this group of distilleries. Always surprised me. Also had a tasting in Perth earlier this year. Seem to be enjoying it more now. Yeah, your palate will change over time, and you'll appreciate things in a different order as well. I mean, this is I'm enjoying this. I've tasted this before as well. I'm enjoying it far more now, I think, than I did before.
It's just a variation on the same word, Matt. I mean, we're talking underdogs tonight, but this distillery has always been underrated. I think it's always produced better spirit than the whiskey drinking community gives it credit for.
Oh, yeah. Strongly agree. Comment from David Gilks. Unfortunately, not playing along at home tonight. We know, David, because normally you throw out the most amazing tasting notes for each whiskey. Your absence has been noted, but this G15 was fabulous when it came up in a tasting. Yeah, appreciate that. That's fantastic.
I love the sweetness too. There's a lovely sweetness that goes hand in hand with that peat. And it's organic peat too. It's we talk about the difference between peat and smoke, and there is a difference between the two. And to be fair, you've got to be drinking and analysing and appreciating whiskey for a while to start to pick where that line of distinction is. For me, I don't think this is particularly smoky, but it is wonderfully peaty, and it's that real forest floor peat, that organic peat. It's the stick your nose into a potting bag of potting mix sort of peat, that earthy forest floor stuff. It's just sensational, but it's balanced with the sweetness from the malt, which I just think is fantastic.
That's lovely. There's something very different, and this is part of the whole point of tonight is Underdogs, is codes, and we've already gushed about most of these tonight and gone, I've really thought about this whiskey if it wasn't for him being in my glass right now. And there's no chance that you probably go around saying, man, how good is Distillery 80 or how good is Distillery 46? Because we don't really sort of, even in the nerdiest of malt circles, you don't really hear people talk about, Glenlossie and say, oh, I love Glenlossie. I hunt out every Glenlossie I can find. And it's the same with, this spirit, same with Ros do, So it's kind of fun to explore those tonight.
You shouldn't say you love Distillery 80 anyway. You just love the specific casks and the flavors coming out of each individual one, which is always different.
Yeah, exactly. I have a wacky tasting note. Corbin says the palate is like having a crisp IPA and chasing it with a strong cup of Bonox. I can't remember the last time.
You've been reading too many SMWS tasting notes.
I don't think that's a wacky tasting note at all. I think it's an extraordinarily accurate one. I think it's
a very perspective.
You know what? I would love to do a tasting. In fact, I might now. I'm about to let the cat out of the bag. I would love to do a tasting and serve this blind and lead the room up the garden path and have them thinking it's from Isla. And they'd come along for the ride, wouldn't they? You could just imagine everyone going, oh, yeah, could this be Carlila? Maybe it's a distillery, Kilherman. You can just see people going for it.
Andrew, one of my favorite tricks that you played once on an audience in Sydney was for a festival tasting, I think it was, or no, it was a gathering night, like 3 or 4 years ago, where we had Society 33 as the gathering cask. And there was enough whiskey of that cask evenly distributed to every branch in the world. So we got like 2 cases in the country. And the express instructions from the UK were that the bottle was not to be sold. It was only to be shared around at tastings. And I thought that was very cool. And you poured the 6th whiskey out as Ardbeg 10. And everyone's nose in a glass and, ooh, wow.
But they didn't know it was Ardbeg 10. They thought it was the society bottling. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It was fantastic. And then the 33 came out afterwards, which was a real moment. That was great.
Yeah.
Organic peat. Oh, Mark, this sounds like sour grapes, my friend, from your scoring at Champs perhaps this year. Organic peat as opposed to the plastic peat profile of the Glenmorangie peated at Champs this year. Well. The lightly peated Champs year. Yes, it was a tough lineup, and if you're calling it plastic peat, which means you probably didn't guess that one correctly.
I heard through a mutual colleague, Matt, that when you saw my score sheet at the Champs, you laughed this year.
That is not true. You were sitting next to me. Hold on a second. That is not true. You told me your score, and I said that it was. I'm not going to say your score. It's up to you. But I did not laugh. No, the only response that I.
It was more like a light giggle.
The only response. Yeah.
A mutual colleague of ours said that it's a badge of honor getting such a low score in the champs because it means that all you're really doing is just drinking society whiskey all the time.
It's true. It's true. It's probably true, actually. So, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. If you don't drink core range as much as, if I wasn't doing the picks, I'd be on 0 every year. It's one of those things you don't come back to those whiskeys often enough, especially when you've discovered the SMWS. Dave, you've got to come to champs one year. You've got to definitely get to champs one year, and it doesn't matter. The score doesn't matter. Yeah, the score doesn't matter.
You're gonna have a good time. That's the point. It's going to be amazing.
It's such a good night. But we've just had it, so there's no point talking about it. It's just been that was just last month. So, but we're onwards and upwards. And I'm glad to enjoy these 5 whiskeys with you, fine gentlemen, tonight. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who tuned in along with us and enjoyed a dram. So, Slanjava. We will love you and leave you here. Bring champs to Perth. Love you and leave you here for now. And appreciate you all coming on for these virtual tastings. We love hosting them. We love having you involved with them and throwing your comments and questions out as we went along tonight. Adam, Andrew, all of the guests, thank you so much. Yes, of course, thank you, Betty. That was great. It was a great night. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone who tuned in tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, well done, Matt. Well done, Adam. Fantastic night. Fantastic whiskies. We'll see you next time.
Cheers, folks.
Cheers, boys.